Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Faith at Home lockdown devotional. This is the third session, and it's the one that this week I would encourage you to maybe give a go as a family. But if not, don't worry, you can still work through some of these questions on your own as well. This week we've been thinking about this theme of gospel, which means good news. And so far we've seen good news in the grace that we're shown, that Paul writes about in Ephesians. We've seen good news in the humility of God, which is also a path that we're invited to walk. And we read about that in Paul's letter to the Philippians. And today we're thinking about the good news of new life in Christ. And again, Paul writes about this in his next letter, the letter to the Colossians. And I hope you've had a little skim through and a read of chapter 3, verses 1 to 17. In this passage today, Paul talks about, he uses two analogies or metaphors, and we're going to explore these briefly together. And the first one is the practice of baptism. And so in verse 5, he talks about putting to death our sinful nature. All those things that don't belong in God's kingdom, we're to put to death. And then in verse 10, he talks about putting on the new self. So the old self has been put to death. And verse 10, put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge and the image of its creator. And so this is the symbol of baptism. When we go under the water, we're putting to death our old life. And as we're being raised out of the water, we're receiving a new life that is being renewed in the image of God, that we're being made to be more like him. What does that look like? Well, the second analogy helps us with this. And Paul talks about putting on a bunch of clothing. We're given a new wardrobe in this new life. And we see this in verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion and kindness and humility, gentleness and patience. And so this is the new wardrobe that belongs to the people of God who have been raised out from death to new life in Christ. This is good news because these are not things that we just try really hard to get better at, but this is the new wardrobe. It's a gift. We're given these new things to put on: compassion and kindness and humility. It's the Spirit of God that works in and through us. It's the freedom that comes from having been forgiven of our old life and being raised to new life in Jesus. This is the new life for Jesus' followers that we get to live.